Hi everyone, today we're going to be making a classic simple skirt block. This is just a high-waisted skirt block going down to the knee length. You can adjust this as you want to, but I want you to follow the technique first of all, and then you can use this to create other styles of skirts. So you're going to start off with a piece of fabric that measures your largest horizontal measurement plus 14 inches by your skirt length plus 2 inches. Fold the fabric in half. So along the width of the fabric. So there I have my center front, which is the folded edge, and then the opposite end with the open end, I'm going to fold in a 2-inch zip allowance fold, and this is my center back. It's important to press this, and then you also need to press the center front fold as well. So there, I've got my center front laying over my center back. There's your center front and center back edges lined up together. Then along the top here you have your waist seam, and along the bottom you have your hem. Get the head of your tape and place it level with your waist seam, and then mark 9.5 inches. This is going to serve as your hip line. Now imagine this hip line as a line running horizontally across the fabric. Now take your hip measurement, divide it by 4 plus 2 inches and mark it along the hip line, measuring from the center folds outwards. Mark this with a small cross. Now along the waist seam, take your waist measurement, divide that by 4 plus 2 inches, and again mark with a small cross, measuring from the center out. Next you want to mark along the hem. I'm doing a straight skirt, so I'm going to be measuring the same distance as the hip from the center folds to the hip line cross, and I'm just replicating that along the hem line, again from the center fold outwards. However, if you wanted yours to be tighter, you could always go in a couple of inches, or if you wanted a very pencil fitting skirt, then you could use your waistline measurement and measure that along the hem. Now join up your crosses with some straight lines and curves. I'm starting from the hem, and I'm going to draw a straight line towards the cross at the hip line, going 2/3 up the way. Then I'm going to freehand the curve that's going to intercept the cross at the hip line and then finish off at the waistline. Now you can cut along your lines. You don't need to leave any seam allowance with this, because the seam allowance is accounted for within that 2 inches extra that you added when you divided your measurements. Cut a little notch through all the layers at the hip line, just so when you're sewing the side seams together, you know where the hip aligns. Now to place your dart, measure half of your apex, so that's your bust point to bust point, from the center out, and then fold a vertical line all the way down the skirt. Press this in place because you need a very definite crease, and that's going to serve as the center line of your dart. Now you need to invert the creases so that all of them are projecting on the wrong side of the fabric. The dart at the front is 1/2 inch deep at the waist and tapers down 7 inches. So once I've done my markings of the dart, I'm just going to join my markings up with a straight line using my ruler. Now we're just going to create the darts at the back as well. So again, I'm going to invert the crease that is projecting on the right side of the fabrics. Pin along the back center fold so you can keep the two pieces together. Now that your center back fold is pinned together, you can work with the back pieces as one piece. I'm just inverting the dart at the left side so it's projecting onto the wrong side of the fabric, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark my darts like I did with the front piece. The dart is 1/2 inch deep at the waist and tapers down 6 inches for the back, and these are the lines I'm going to sew along to create my darts. If you find that the dip in your back is quite deep, you can actually make this dart 1 inch deep at the back and then taper down the 6 inches. This deep dart works very well for people with around the buttocks or with a deep dent in the back. Now that your darts are all done, you can press them. Make sure you press your darts out very neatly. This is a very important part of sewing. It just makes everything sit much better when your darts are pressed out and all your seams are pressed nicely. So to put your skirt together, align your center front directly over the center back, so the pieces have to be open. And making sure that it's flat throughout, pin along the side seams about 2 inches inside of the seams. Once this is done, you're now ready to mark your measurements into the side seams. Again, I'm marking to the left because the excess, like I said, is always on the left. Once your sides are all pinned up, you now need to mark your measurements into the skirt to create your side seams. So I'm taking my waist measurement first of all, dividing it by 4, and from the center fold outwards, I'm going to mark my waist measurement divided by 4. You can at this point add some ease if you wanted to. I suggest going only up by 1/4 of an inch because that will give you an inch all the way around. However, I like it to be very fitted, so I'm marking it exactly at my waist. Again, you're going to do the same at the hip line. Take your hip measurement, divide it by 4, and again at the hem, I'm just going to measure 1 inch from the edge, and I'm going to mark that because I don't want it to be overly fitted. Now once those markings are in place, I'm going to just freehand the curve from the waist that intercepts down to the hips and then leads all the way down to the hemline. I'm going to do that part with a ruler like I did earlier. So just going 2/3 of the way up, and then I'm going to freehand that curve from the hips and join the end of that line. So that is my seam allowance, and I'm going to copy that seam allowance onto the other side. So because I was sure that my fabric was flat down when I marked the first seam allowance, I'm just going to again copy the distance from the edge at each point, so that's at the waist, the hip and at the hem, and then I'm going to do my curves and my straight line just like I did previously. Once your side seams are all drawn, you can take it over to the machine and sew along your lines. I'd suggest first of all doing this with a basting stitch if this is the first time you're trying this method out, so if it doesn't fit, it's easy to remove those stitches and then redo it again. All sewn up, it's time now to put your zip into the back. So I'm going to measure about 6 inches from the hemline, and that's going to form my vent for my skirt, and I'm going to mark at that point. And then again from the waist, I'm measuring down to the hip line plus 1 inch because that's where my zip is going to be inserted, and I'm going to mark that. I'm going to sew between those two markings that I've made. So starting from the mark below the waistline, I'm going to sew down to the mark above the hemline. And I'm sewing this in the crease of the center back. Now once that is done, remove all your pins and you can now fit your skirt to make sure you're very happy with the fit. So that's my classic pencil skirt all made up in a plain cotton fabric, just so you can see all the darting and everything, all the markings and everything quite clearly. Now I'm going to make it in an exciting African print fabric. Right now what you're seeing me doing is creating some facing. So to do that, I'm just folding some leftover fabric in the same way that I did my initial fold when I started making my skirt, and I have used my skirt pieces as a pattern to cut out the facing pieces, and these are just about 4 inches thick. So guys, this is the final product. This is my skirt made up in a print fabric, a lovely Ankara print fabric. I mean, it's such a versatile project. You can make it in a long length or in a shorter length and embellish it how you want, perhaps with some frills or something. Actually, a frill hem will work, really, really good with this. Yeah, so now I just need to give it a good press and find somewhere to take it to. Guys, I hope you've liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also find me on all my social media networks, which will be Twitter and Instagram at Chinelo Bally. If you give the project a try, or any of my projects, I'd love to see it. Please hashtag Chinelo Bally, Chinelo Bally Lifestyle. And I'm really looking forward to seeing your makes, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.